Two women from the neighborhood jabbered at the village well when a young boy darted up to fetch a bucket of water. He'd grow up to become the collector, but right now his only skill is trading. He's only level 1. After he fills his bucket, he turns and walks away. And the women mutter about how pitiful it is to be stuck with a single, useless skill while one of them sighs in relief that her son won't have to endure it. The First Lady silences her friend in a flash, snapping, "You're speaking too loudly," as the young collector stalks away with prickling irritation. He can still hear them. Right then, two kids cut him off, sneering and hurling the boy with the useless skill at him. Two troublemakers close in, barking for him to leave the village. The aspiring collector plants his feet, locks eyes with them, and refuses to back down. He snaps back, accusing them of wielding powers only criminals would dare. He's right, isn't he? The run's abilities: coercion, a rancid stench, brute physical strength, relentless tailing, visions of the future and healing. Infuriated by his remark, the bullies erupted, quickly raining punches down on him while sneering that he's exactly what his older sister didn't want. Defeat hit him like a punch. He couldn't compete with the strength skill's raw power. When it comes to skills, a single brutal truth haunts him. Any skill that actually works beats a useless one. He scrapes blood from a split cheek, strides into their home, and tells his sister, "I'm back." She whips around from her desk, long hair trailing like a banner as she greets him. Every inch screams prodigy. She dominates critiques and sketches and aces every subject, from memory feats to fine arts. All her skills blaze at level 20. He flicks a glance at her desk and asks, "Were you busy drawing something?" His older sister announced she'd just finished and flashed a portrait of the two of them smiling. He went mute, eyes locked on it, and when she pressed for his verdict, he breathed, "It's good, as always." He dropped his gaze and blurted that the other kids had branded him her leftover scraps again. His older sister exploded in protest. How could they dare call her beloved younger brother that? But isn't it true? He barrels on, roaring that she possesses 10 talents in both the arts and sciences, and the whole town keeps saying it's a shame she's stuck here with such gifts. He's saddled with a single, utterly impractical skill: trading. When he was much younger, he strode into an evaluation to have his skills judged. The evaluation exposed his ability: trading. The appraiser had never seen such a skill and couldn't figure out how it worked. Even so, he slammed the appraisal sheet into our hero's hands and bluntly declared he had only one skill: trading. When he arrived home that day, the boy resolved to test his trading skill with an apple. He stepped up to the fruit and thundered, "Trading! Sell this apple!" Silence swallowed the room. He blurted to his parents that he'd tried his skill again today. It failed. Both sighed in frustration and snapped, "What's the point of a rare talent if you can't even use it?" He felt almost useless, crushed as they openly showed their disappointment in him. His mother actually wished he'd get his older sister's powers. What kind of parents are these two? The poor kid crumpled with hurt, and when his older sister noticed, she leapt to his defense. She lunges into the conversation, slamming home the reminder that her artwork has saved their parents a small fortune. They propose buying a lovely house in the capital. Their parents explode with excitement, already imagining just the three of them moving away and abandoning our unfortunate hero. Everyone's jaws drop as she declares she'll stay in the village with her younger brother. What? Why would they pull that? The three should bolt for the capital together and leave her idle brother in the dust, and their mother bluntly tells them not to bother with him. The aspiring hero swallows his pride and sides with his parents. He has only one skill he can't even wield, so why should anyone stick around someone like him? His older sister flat out disagrees. She's thrilled to share a home with her cherished little brother. It means the world to her. A full year living together on their own, and our hero still hasn't figured out how to trigger or wield his skills. His sister breathes calm into him, urging him to try experiments slowly, one small step at a time. He dodged every confrontation he could. Bring up a fight and he'd flinch, the bruise on his cheek still a raw, burning reminder. His sister, a pharmaceutical ace, slaps a secret ointment onto every bruise and he's whole again in an instant. He admits he's burning with envy and pleads for at least one of her skills. She snaps that if she could, she'd have given one away long ago. A sharp knock rips through their conversation. She throws the door open to an older man who says he's looking forward to her evaluation today as well, and she grins, promising she'll be at the village square. The second the door slammed shut, our protagonist fired off, "You're appraising the villagers again?" And she nodded. The little hero bristled as the villagers preyed on his sister. He scowled and snapped that her gift for appraising things didn't give them the right to keep mooching her help without giving anything back. She gave his head a gentle, reassuring pat, flashed a warm smile, and vowed she'd never leave him behind. She declared his talent priceless, and her words struck him like a lifeline. Relief surged through him in a world where parents and villagers scoffed that he was worthless. She was the only one who had his back, and when her warm affection sent him blushing, he squirmed and pleaded for her to stop patting his head so often. She flashes a grin, strides to the door and calls out that she might return late. The mayor's relative is visiting. He bade her goodbye, sure that as long as she stayed in his life, he needed no one and nothing else. She stepped outside, kept glancing back, so he waved her off with a smile. Alone in the house, he seizes the chance and launches a full-scale assault on the clutter. His sister can't clean to save her life, so as he dives into tidying the house, his eyes snag on a drawing she sketched earlier. Clutching it, he's forced to admit it's an uncannily perfect portrait of the two of them. By then, night has already shown up. He bolted upright from the sofa, heart racing, with no idea when sleep had crept in. He shot to his feet and shouted for his sister. No answer. Sure she was still in town, he snatched a lamp and rushed out, thinking that even older she was still just a girl. He darted out of the house, certain his meeting with her would be over in minutes. Shock ripped through him as the entire village was devoured by roaring flames. What was going on? What nightmare had struck? He ripped toward the village, every pounding step driven by desperate fear for his sister. He pushed through the wreckage, stumbling over bodies strewn everywhere. The whole place a brutal, silent tableau of total devastation. He tripped on a corpse and staggered back, blood freezing as he realized it was the two women and the bullies from that morning. The sight of them made him sick to his stomach. He couldn't fathom who would do such a thing, and that shock forged an unbreakable vow to find his sister. A bolt of realization slammed into him. She'd mentioned the mayor's relative. That was the clue he needed, and she's supposed to be at the mayor's house right now. Our hero hurtles toward the mayor's residence, skids into the entry yard strewn with dead bodies, bolts to the front door, finds it unlocked, and steps inside, only to find the entrance hall littered with more dead bodies, the stairs choked with corpses. Bodies lay with severed limbs and fingers grotesquely jutting skyward. Suddenly, a voice ripped through the hush from upstairs and struck his ears. "Bellow, freeze, and stop them dead in their tracks." A jolt rips him from his daydream and he smacks his cheek to snap into focus. Wait, is that the mayor's voice? If the mayor's still alive, he could be the one who knows where his sister is. A voice keeps bellowing, demanding to know why that person would do this, as our hero climbs the stairs, picking his way over the lifeless bodies and screaming his sister's name. He clamps his jaw and chants "Don't look down" like a prayer, clinging to the fragile thread of hope that his sister is still alive. Clutching a single worthless skill, he bore his parents' contempt and the village's merciless jeers. He stands unshaken as the mayor's voice slices through the chaos, crystal clear, while he surrenders the village to the attacker. Another voice cut in, sneering that a ruined village meant nothing to them. He flung the door open, and the mayor's body hurtled past him. He hurtled into the wall, blood and bruises splattered across him. For a heartbeat, he caught sight of the older man before. He locks his gaze on the figure before him, and it's his sister the whole time. She greets him warmly. He stands there, completely puzzled. What's going on? His sister, dripping with sarcasm, snaps, "You mean why everyone's dead?" She storms up to him and confesses she botched her calculations. The mayor's relative scored insanely high, and he uncovered that she wields a plundering skill. Hold on, what does that mean? She drops the bomb. She'd been hiding that skill all along, slipping past everyone with masterful concealment and flawless acting. His brother stands frozen, shock shredding his thoughts as he fumbles to understand what she meant by plundering. She snaps that it's high time she took action. At this moment, she sweeps her hand toward the heap of corpses and declares she siphoned every villager's ability by evaluating them. She blasted through every task. There's nothing left to hold her here. She single-handedly slaughtered the entire village. Every last soul cut down. Disbelief crashes over him. Did she really kill them? He shakes his head. No, that's not true. It's all a lie. He watched his sister walk away, cold terror coiling in his gut. He couldn't believe it. This couldn't be his sister. He knew her to be kind. Suddenly she spun and locked eyes with him, mischief sparking in her gaze. He skids to a halt on the stairs. She laughs out loud and keeps descending, telling him she already knows he thought she was going to kill him. Her psychology expertise reads him like an open book. So she soothes him and says not to worry. She spares him. For now, his skill is the one power she can't steal. Hold up. What does she mean by being unable to take his skill? She steps toward him, smiling. Exactly like you'd expect from her little brother, he fires a sharp question, and she thrusts a book into his hands, promising to teach him priceless skills. Many common skills stand between victory and defeat: raw strength, ruthless coercion, and razor-sharp detection. Her plundering skill is one of a kind. Only one person can wield it at any moment, so it's staggeringly rare. His trading skill screams rarity, Unparalleled, never seen in the past, and all but impossible to resurface now or ever. It's a true one of a kind. He sprints after her, a burning need driving him to learn everything about that unique skill. A jolt hits her. He has no idea how to wield his own trading skill. She leans in close, voice barely a whisper as she walks him through how to unleash his skill. She snaps, eyes flashing, that at her current plundering rank she still can't snatch any exclusive skills. She's ripping herself away from the village and charging into the world to sharpen her plundering into a lethal edge, so she can seize his skill. She's hell-bent on snatching it and ending him the next time they meet. She urges him to sharpen his signature skill. He rockets after her, but she springs into the air, blurs away with blistering speed, and rides a roaring gust of wind magic to escape. She left him in the dust. He had no clue about the skills she'd just unleashed. How could she know so much about his one and only technique? After everything, he refuses to believe his sister did it. It's not true. She's a good person. If he sprints home now, she'll definitely be there. The empty house screams that everything that just happened was real. The only trace of her is the drawing she sketched earlier that day. Sobs ripped through him as he choked out. Why did she claim she intended to kill me? Why is this unraveling at this exact moment? The collector cradles a locket, fixated on the drawing his sister made, until a man from the carriage snaps the silence and asks if the person in the sketch is his girlfriend. The collector snaps, "She's my sister!" And the other man's jaw drops in stunned silence. The collector still gapes in disbelief while the other man stands dumbfounded. What is this guy even saying? At least the collector shrugged and admitted he'd been talking only to himself. Hope clawed at his gut. He clung to the belief his older sister had a reason for what she'd done. She radiated kindness and talent. What ravenous hunger for new skills drove her to murder? And why did she keep him in the dark? Her presence hangs heavy in the room, and he still aches to ask her the questions lodged in his throat. He aches to see her one last time and unravel her thoughts, willing to march into death for that truth. He spent all this time sharpening the art of soul bargaining, driven only to reunite with his sister. If this is the only way they can meet, he tightens his jaw and plunges in. Fueled by that resolve, he launched into his next journey, spotted a towering building, slipped inside to hunt down the right unit, walked a little farther down the hall, and finally knocked on the exact door. He swaggered in, called himself the Collector, and announced he'd buy any skill they'd written off as useless or troublesome. A voice from the other side of the door greeted him, declaring they'd been expecting the Collector's arrival. Meet the Collector and his sister, their lives ripped apart and reforged by their abilities, and the brutal, heartbreaking stories of others crushed under the weight of their own powers. The customer gushes thanks to the Collector for snapping up their unwanted skills. The Collector brushes off their worries with a cocky grin, declares it's no trouble, and says he's glad to keep running the collection for them. Buoyed by that assurance, the Collector prowls the market, bellowing his collection services so everyone knows he's ready to buy any unwanted or problematic skills they possess. After grinding non-stop, he unlocked 12 skills and ducked into the nearest pub to catch his breath. He slumps into the chair and it hits him. He's become used to this grind. He cuts through the neighborhood, watches kids tearing up the streets laughing, lets himself believe the city is calm for a breath, then pulls out his locket and stares at the picture of him and his sister like it's a lifeline. Until now, he's been bartering skills like prized cards in a high-stakes game. Since his older sister taught him the ropes, he's been turning every skill she handed him into a paycheck. Panic clawed at him. He still had no idea where his sister was. He'd been shuttling his collection service from town to town. Sure, he'd have run into his sister by now. Then a stranger's voice cuts through. "Are you the one who runs the collection service?" And the question yanks him out of his daydream. He snapped his head up as an older man approached, books hovering around him like orbiting moons, asked for a private conversation, and left the Collector oddly confused. The Collector perches in an opulent house, teacup in hand, while the place's vastness coils around him, snatching away any chance to relax. He locks eyes with the elder sage and snaps. "Are you really going to sell every skill you have to that Collector?" The old man snaps his fingers and agrees. He'll sell every skill he owns except his memory, and he's sitting on a hefty cache of level 20 abilities up for grabs. The Collector proclaims the old man wields a vast arsenal of valuable skills, and the sage snaps. "Can you actually see them?" Our hero grins and announces he snagged the appraisal skill ages ago, so he can scan anyone's abilities whenever he wants. The Collector grins, saying a level 10 skill already turns heads. But every one of the sage's skills blazes at level 20, a jump that makes level 10 look tiny. The Collector's eyes burned. He wanted to buy every piece, but his pockets were empty. The older man smiled and tossed out a price, $100,000 for the lot. The Collector froze, mind racing. Even as this works in his favor, he's desperate to know why the elder sage is acting like this. He admits it's the weight of age. He's burned decades chasing knowledge, convinced he must shoulder the responsibility for anyone born with the same gift. Time wore on and doubt gnawed at him. He began to wonder if his efforts would ever be enough. He wrestled with abandoning his old self, then ripped that life away and forged himself anew as an adventurer. The collector hung on the old man's every word, burning to know if the retiree would really throw himself into adventuring. As the sage pressed on, he admitted he'd heard about it. The collector doesn't just snatch up skills, he resells them. First, the older man scans his skill slots, counting empty spaces to make sure the skills he discarded will fit. The collector reels at the older man's unexpected knowledge, relief crashing over him as he realizes the man understands skill slots. Your skills are chained to the slots you're born with. Most people get only 2 to 5, and no amount of money can pry open extra slots or buy every skill you crave. The collector probes whether the older man wants to pick up a few skills, and the older man declares he intends to master every skill needed to become an adventurer. He sharpens swordsmanship, forges brutal strength and raw power, and hones his healing. Still, he hungers for stealth and tracking, demanding those two be razor-sharp. The collector commands every skill the sage craves and throws out prices the sage can't help but accept. It's over. The collector seizes the elder sage's 2 hands with his own and drains every scrap of the old man's power into himself. And the front door swings open, snapping their attention to the sudden noise. A small child peers through the doorway, calling for his grandfather, and the collector's gaze snaps to him, instantly sizing up his archery, raw strength, lightning reflexes, and hawk-like eyesight. These skills are tailor-made for anyone itching to be an adventurer. So the boy cuts in to ask his grandpa if he's finished talking since he's setting off on his first adventure tomorrow. And the collector and the elder sage stare at him before both spring to their feet and stride over to him. The sage bends to his grandchild and warns that the adventurer's life teeters on a razor's edge of danger. And the boy scoffs, shrugging the warning aside. He swears the first spark to become an adventurer was struck by the rousing adventure tales his grandfather read to him every night. The old man's brow furrowed, and he owned up. He regretted what he'd done. He plants his feet, turns his back on his grandson, condemns the boy's chosen path with a cold stare, and forbids him from ever returning to the house. The boy shoots the collector a disarming smile, apologizes for his grandfather's behavior, and assures our hero that, grumpy as he may seem, his grandfather hides a kind heart. The old man snaps at his grandson to stop saying unnecessary things. The boy just grins, shrugs off the warning, whispers, "I love you," and then says goodbye. The collector's gaze zeroes in on them, chest tightening at the unbreakable bond between grandfather and grandson. After the boy slipped away, the sage leaned in, eyes blazing. "Did the collector catch my grandson's skill, and what did he say?" The collector freezes, sure he'd dodged the question, but the old man drags it into the open and he's cornered. Praising that person's skill pops out of him like instinct. He proclaims to the sage, pride crackling in his voice, that his grandson's talents are extraordinary and destined for a life of adventure. The elder nods, turns his gaze away, and murmurs that his grandson leans too heavily on his power and will charge headlong into danger. With the job finished, the collector strides back to town. He paid a brutal price but gained fierce new skills, and still thoughts of the elder sage and his grandchild claw at him. The elder wore contentment like a mask, but the collector's curiosity seethed. Why did the elder sage surrender every skill to chase a life as an adventurer? There's an extra feature for concealment and tailing. The collector scoffs. Hiding and tailing aren't for adventurers. Those skills belong to thieves. He can't shake the fear the older man might cross into crime, yet it feels impossible, wildly out of character for someone with those talents. Right then his sister's memory slammed into him, humbling him all over again. What could he possibly know about that? He didn't have those talents, and the thought stopped him cold in the middle of the street. He lifted his gaze to the sky, wrestling with one brutal question. Postpone it until tomorrow? The next day, in a nameless forest, a band of adventurers crept down the path, oblivious to a shadow clinging to their heels. Among them was the sage's grandson, striding cheerfully at the front while the others lagged behind, one visibly on edge. Soon he snatched their goal, the monster egg they needed for their task, and charged at it, utterly reckless. He reached for the eggs when the mother monster appeared behind him. He spun around, terror freezing his veins. And as a shadow reared to leap in, a party member felled the beast with a single, lightning-quick strike. The grandson thanked his teammate with a grateful grin. Another member chuckled, pride swelling in him. The soul girl exhaled in relief. They'd pulled off the task without a single mishap. The boy snapped his head toward the forest and told his companions he'd felt someone watching them just moments ago, though it might be nothing but his imagination. Hidden in the trees, he watched them, relief roaring through him as his hideout stayed secret. He slips back into their shadow to tail the group. Then a hand lands on his shoulder. The collector. The figure tailing the group is the elder sage himself, and the collector presses him about how his grandchild fared on their first mission. The sage now commands expert swordsmanship, crushing physical strength, raw power, and potent healing. The only thing he preserved from his original abilities was his memory, the soul skill. The older man pins the collector with a sharp glare, ready to demand why he's here. The collector merely shrugs, saying he came to check on the elder sage. He'd be gravely concerned if the powers he granted were being abused. It eats at the sage. Even with both tracking and hiding at level 7, he still couldn't track down the collector. The collector grins and declares he used the very skill he bought. He sold 7 levels of concealment and tailing to the sage and walked away with 23 levels of those skills. The old man never suspected the collector could siphon skills and hand them over piece by piece. The collector smirked and said he could pull it off. His trump card was a skill called management. His management skill lets him dial skill levels up or down on the fly during interactions and stash abilities outside the normal slots. He warps skill levels to his will and crams an impossible number of abilities into a single slot. The elderly man spun away, oblivious that a skill could be used like that. As he departs, the collector demands if the sage will keep shadowing his grandson like this. The old man replies coldly that he will, so long as his body holds. He swore to watch his grandson every single day. The collector reels and snaps. Isn't that a little too protective? What could drive this elder sage to go to such extremes for the boy? The older man collapses onto a nearby rock and, voice cracking, confesses he's doing this to make amends with his family. Years ago, when he was much younger, the sage admitted he'd been consumed by his own mastery and had neglected his family. He devoured books into the night, each page stretching his mind further. He ripped through everything available, but the craving only sharpened, convinced he deserved more. After a full day of reading, he bursts back through the door as his wife and daughter rush him into tight, laughing embraces. He strides past them, not a shred of interest in engaging. For years he kept up the act, marrying and starting a family as a flawless facade, while the sage burned with iron determination to quench his ravenous thirst for knowledge. When his daughter announced her upcoming marriage, he shrugged and brushed her words aside like they were nothing. He brushed off his wife and his daughter's new family. After devouring every book in his country, he crossed into neighboring lands to hunt down whatever knowledge they still guarded. One day he tore through every book in sight, and when the final page fell away, no triumph greeted him, only a hollow, cold silence. A cold knot formed in his gut. As he mapped his next move, realization slammed into him. He'd been gifted with numerous skills. Having finally sated his thirst for knowledge, he peered into the unknown and wondered what would come next. A brutal truth slammed into him. Nothing came after. Loaded with all this knowledge, he clenched his jaw and demanded to know what it was for, then strode to his desk and found letters from his daughter. If this knowledge isn't meant for him, it has to be for someone dear. He rips open the letters and finally reads them, and after that, he decides to return to the countryside. On a rain-soaked afternoon, he bursts onto his old doorstep and bellows that he's finally home. He finds no one there to greet him. When he steps into the house, his daughter freezes in shock, then fixes him with a cold, furious glare and snaps. "Why would you even come back now?" She says the epidemic ripped through her life, killing her mother and husband. Now only she and her child remain. Who's she trying to fool? Her dad wouldn't bat an eye. Stunned, the sage sank to his knees and poured out a trembling apology to his daughter as a wave of emotion crashed over him. Tears ripped free as he watched his child suffering, shame crashing down. He'd been a foolish father. His daughter stared him down and told him there was little he could do for her. She was nearing the end of her life, and if he truly wanted to atone for his past, the least he could do was show up for his grandson. The sage slips into the next room, and his daughter implores him to look after her son. The little boy reaches for his grandfather, who gently clasps the child's tiny hands. Not long after, his daughter died. Guilt from years of ignoring his family festered in him, and what he's doing now still can't make amends. Nevertheless, he's already sworn it. From this moment on, he'll give every last thing he owns to his only family. Doubt lashes the collector. Can he really go through with this? The older man nods, calm and resolute, ready to lay down the very talents he'd been gifted. Right now, the one skill he needs above all is the power to summon every face and relive every moment he shared with his family. His memory skill is his lifeline. The collector recoils, his hand snapping to the locket of his sister's drawings the instant someone says family faces and the times they shared. A sudden tide of memories crashes over him. Every laugh and secret with his sister. Treasures no one would ever want to lose. The collector leans in, asking the sage if a skill slot is free. The younger man hides a one-of-a-kind skill he's been guarding, and if it's for the older man, he'll hand it over without hesitation. He steps forward and offers to sell it to the sage. The collector vows this skill will let the old man care for his grandson until his dying breath. What? The sage's eyes snapped wide. He'd never heard of this. Could the collector really wield a skill like that? And if it's true, it must demand a terrifying price, right? The collector snarls the skill is one of a kind and only goes on sale at level 50. At that lofty rank, the old man would have to drain every coin from his coffers to buy it. He didn't even finish his sentence. The sage's determined stare stopped him cold. The collector must have seen the elder's reply, right? That's game over. The next day, the grandson's crew packed the city square, and my pulse spiked when I spotted the new member about to join them today. The boy blurted that this person burned with a fierce desire to join their group. Curiosity crackled in the other two. The boy shrugged. He didn't really know why, but more allies always help adventurers, and the collector sat on a nearby bench, quietly observing their conversation. The boy erupts. Their newest member is arriving! A young boy edges forward, voice trembling as he apologizes for keeping them waiting, then chokes out, I'm Lou, and vows he won't be a burden to the group. The party freezes on him for a beat, then erupts into laughter that melts the tension. They poke fun at his speech, calling him an old man, and even the boy blurts that Lou sounds like his grandfather, but nothing else matters now. He beckons Lou into their party. The collector swivels back to the group, a grin carving across his face. They crowed he'd slipped into his grandson's party, and the skill he sold to the sage, known as the youthful mask, is a rare ability only elves possess. When someone hits level 50 with this skill, they shave 50 years off their looks. They'll appear 5 decades younger, but it's only skin deep. The elder sage hadn't actually become younger. Only his appearance had been rewound into the guise of youth. The collector's jaw dropped as that raw, painfully personal story spilled into the room. Relief roared in him when the elder sage unleashed the perfect technique, saving the old man and turning despair into triumph. With the task complete, the collector forged ahead, vowing to restock his stash of youthful masks. Then a girl's stumble snapped him to attention. She sent her basket of flowers tumbling a few paces in front of him, then misstepped into the canal. The unlucky girl nearly went under until the collector lunged, hauled her back onto the bank, and made sure she was okay. Their eyes locked, and she bowed her head, one simple gesture that spoke both apology and gratitude. She hacked a cough mid-sentence and admitted that scenes like this happen to her all the time. Grime smothers her blooms, yet she still has to hawk them. The collector's face lights up as they declare the flowers sell-worthy. She staggers back, completely stunned. Her jaw drops when he blurts he'll buy every single one from her. He's practically trembling with glee, desperate to purchase all of her She gapes at the hours, disbelief blazing, and demands, Are you serious? The instant he confirms it, the girl explodes with heartfelt thanks. She snaps up the bouquet and wraps the flowers for him, fingers dancing as the task consumes her. The collector's eyes lock on her. She carries a hard-to-handle skill set, relentless bad luck, constant illness, and a constitution that could shatter at a whisper. Years spent collecting skills showed him countless abilities, but this girl's explosive, tangled fusion of powers is unlike anything he's ever encountered. He was convinced even skills that seemed utterly evil could be twisted into strength. Knowing they'd turned the tide in surprise situations, he slotted them into his collector service inventory. And at that exact moment, the girl spoke. He snapped the collector back to the present as she beamed that her younger brother and sister would have enough to eat today. The instant he learned she had siblings, a memory with his older sister slammed into him. He remembered catching her still awake. Worry snapped at him when she wasn't in bed. She waved it off. She's up sketching pictures to sell. And he blurted an apology in case she'd accidentally disturbed his sleep. The younger collector moved to her, guilt gnawing at him as he longed to pull in money for them. The girl's words hit him like a punch, dragging up memories of the brutal days he and her sister had survived. He yanked a fat stack of cash from his coat. She gasped and tried to refuse it, saying it's too much. But the collector pressed her, snapping that it wasn't even half of what he'd earned. He beams that he scored some cash today and just wants to share his lucky break with her. A triumphant grin spreads across her face as she gleefully pockets his payment. He slams the cash into her palm and snaps that the agreement is sealed. The instant he speaks, their hands flare with light, and she stares at the glow, asking what's happening. The collector shrugs, flashes a lazy grin, and tosses it off as a tiny good luck charm. She pours out her gratitude, and the collector snaps back. No, he's the one who should be thanking her. He eyes her as she strides away, fired up. He just taught her a new skill and can't wait to see what she'll unleash next, so he calls after her. Good luck! He's clawed back all 3 brutal skills he once had, and to fire up his trading ability, he demands the other person's consent plus cold cash. She might call that fee outrageously steep. Guilt gnawed at the collector. He'd just scored 3 skills for next to nothing. He hawked her good luck to even the scales, praying she'd appreciate it. He cradles dirt-streaked blooms, grime clinging to their petals. Yet a sweet perfume still drifts up, and it suddenly hits him. Next time he should hand his friend a bouquet. The next day hit fast, and the collector plunged into the market, combing stalls for supplies for his friend, snatching up essentials, and as a cold crept in, tucking medicine into his bundle. Bulging bags in both hands screamed that the collector might have hauled a massive stash home for his friend. Just then, a voice ripped through the air, calling out to him. That's the woman who just sold him the monster attraction skill. She'd been his very first customer the moment he rolled into town, and he leaned in, voice alive, asking how things had been going. She grinned and said the monsters vanished after that night, so she's been free to venture beyond town and haul back supplies. Her lifelong dream of opening her own diner explodes into reality, and she grabs his sleeve, dragging him along with a triumphant grin. True to her word, she planted the diner smack on the inn's first floor. Amazing news, but the collector's feelings were swallowed by the woman's electric enthusiasm, and she couldn't stop herself. She rushed over to thank him for picking up that brutal skill. Her sincere thanks struck him like a bell, and he lit up. Glad to help as always. With him right there, she confessed she was hunting for staff and offered the position to the collector. She pictured him rocking an apron, dazzling their customers as he moved through the room serving them. She grinned and slipped the job flyer into his bag, even after he'd refused. His collector duties already had him swamped. A gutting blow hits him as the woman turns, waves him off, and says she'll have to give the job to someone else. After she walks away, he stares at the flyer, then presses on. A part-time gig? He could spring that idea on the friend he's about to meet. He shoved the thought aside the instant he remembered his friend freezes up in crowds. He spots the flower girl from earlier. She's still there, hands a blur as she hawks her blossoms. There she is, the same poor girl he ran into the other day, and 2 kids surge toward her at the exact same moment. They skid to a stop in front of her and erupt into a shouting match over who gets first pick of the flower. One roars he arrived first, the other snaps he has the money to buy the flowers. She gently bandaged their heads, handed each of them half the bouquet, and beamed as she praised how brilliantly they'd completed their tasks. Realization slammed into the collector. The girl had said she was caring for a younger brother and sister. He strides up and asks if he can buy a bouquet. Her face instantly blooms. It's him, the customer from yesterday. The collector reels back. She still remembers him, of course. He once bought flowers from her and she practically burst with joy. Silently, he soaks up her relentless diligence, convinced she's born to shine with customers. She presses the flowers into his hands, and their scent slams the flyer the woman had handed her earlier right back into her mind. The collector slid it to the girl as if it were the most natural thing, and she practically leapt with excitement at the idea of a part-time job. He hastily blurted that he'd stumbled on a copy of the flyer and rushed to reassure her it was perfectly fine if she decided to decline. She'd leap at the chance. She's out there right now, hunting for a job, she really is. She beams like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Her terrible asthma has finally eased, and she's bumping into things far less now. The collector watched her with cold, unblinking eyes, keeping to himself that he'd bought her. She was cursed with relentless bad luck, brittle health, and ceaseless sickness. In that instant, the collector was slapped awake by the jaw-dropping force of true skill. He watches the sun bleed toward the horizon and knows he must leave before it sets. The girl gasps at the news, and he flashes a calm smile, saying he's off to see a friend. As he turned away, she called after him for his name. He'd bought her flowers and even offered her a shot at a new job. A grin splits his face as he declares he's the collector, playing it off as nothing more than a roaming peddler. He tossed the words aside, turned on his heel, and strode away. The girl left rooted to the spot, eyes fixed on his receding silhouette, wondering if their paths would ever cross again. Out in a remote expanse where mountain ranges stretch to the horizon, everything lies buried under white snow. Trees stripped of leaves as the collector picks his way along the uneven mountain path, every step a battle even with his crafted tools. Finally, he spots a log cabin and hails a long-haired man busy chopping firewood. The collector thrusts the items he bought in town into his hands, and a man bolts over to help carry his belongings. Right then, his gaze snaps to a bouquet of flowers. It's impossibly adorable. A cold realization hits him. This isn't the collector's handiwork. Could a woman have pulled it off? He laughs as he grills the collector, but the long-haired man was right. The bouquet was from the girl, and the other guy's grin faltered. He'd been praying his friend wasn't a creep as Valade slid aside. The long-haired man yanks the collector as he flops onto a tree stump, grins, and asks the collector for his usual hope blazing that this time things will turn out well. He shot the smile back. The gifts were mere garnish. He'd come for the same familiar ritual that lonely cabin always delivered. He's been showing up for years, insisting our protagonist is one of his rare friends. The world and everyone around him have branded him the unskilled. The long-haired man pleads with the collector to apply his skill to him. The collector obliges. The collector snaps his eyes shut, then flings them open and unleashes his appraisal skill as the other man watches, perfectly calm. The protagonist's face snaps into a verdict. One look and the man already knows the outcome. The collector murmurs, "Sorry." The man waves it off. Why apologize for something he can't change? He sprang up from this tree stump and stormed toward his cabin, teeth bared as he vowed he'd push himself harder. In fact, he's been burning to create lately, whittling a few figures and offering some of his pieces to the collector. Picks a vaults onto one of the carved figures, freezes for a heartbeat, then hurls the question at the other guy. "Will you stop this nonsense?" He thunders that only 1 in 1,000 people is born without skills. Didn't he mention this before? The collector sneered, ripping him apart with a cold truth. The guy has no skill slots, none whatsoever. That's why the collector can't sell him a single skill and why every route to awakening is slammed shut. The tree is about to speak. But the other guy cuts in and speaks first, snuffing the tree's effort like a blown-out candle. Pointless, right? He snarled he'd never stop clawing to awaken his skill. And the collector recoiled as that fierce fire struck him again. The same blazing fire that struck them when they first met years ago still scorches his eyes. He grew from a small boy into a long-haired, muscle-bound man, and the only thing that sets him apart is that stubborn, rebellious glint. Scars from his past had hardened him. One day, right after the collector loudly announced he'd buy anyone's unwanted skills, he ran into the man, and a young boy immediately stepped up to our protagonist. The boy snapped, "You gonna toss aside the skills you've hoarded? Then give them to me." And the collector froze, stunned by the child's audacity. Nobody even asks about the skills he's been stockpiling. Why would a kid even care? Hold up! Astonishment slams into the collector. This child has nothing. No skill slots anywhere, and those blank spaces only cement the suspicion already simmering in him. A random street kid sneers that he's talentless, another brands him inept and tells him to leave town, but the smaller boy shrugs and stares them down. He snaps back, fire in his voice, declaring his talents simply haven't surfaced yet, and vowing to forge them through relentless hard work. The older child scoffs. It's impossible, insisting the boy lacks any skill, and that's why his parents left him. The younger boy snaps back, it can be done. Train like a man possessed and isolate yourself high in the mountains. Certain his talents will explode out any second. He storms off, yanking the collector into a petty squabble and snarling it's useless if it can't grant him a skill. He vows he'll claim one, just wait and see. Did that unruly kid really seclude himself in the mountains? The collector scoffs he didn't follow through. It sounds impossible, so our protagonist bolts up the mountain to confirm. Everyone's stunned. The brave kid is relentlessly honing his skills, swinging his stick through the falling late-night snow. Ragged breath escaping, he swears he'll swing this stick 100 times every day. Keep that up and he could carve out true swordsmanship or raw, bone-crushing strength. He'd even welcome a sudden spark of intuition. He vowed that through relentless work he'd forge the skill, and the boy's fierce determination set the collector's heart ablaze. It knocked the lamp from his hands. Watching the kid train with ruthless focus, our protagonist froze. Was it right to interrupt? The sight dragged him back to when he'd hunted down skills everyone else abandoned during his training, desperate to reunite with his older sister. As he journeyed, he wielded skills, commanding speech, chameleonic acting, razor-edged evaluation, even the secret of eternal youth. And over time he stacked so many abilities that he might have let the blazing zeal he once had smolder into ash without even noticing. A thunderous crash snapped the boy upright. He spun, scanning for anyone nearby, and seeing that, the man steeled himself and vowed to meet the boy right where he stood. He stripped every skill from his slots, leaving only management, eternal youth, and appraisal. The collector snatched up his fallen lantern and strode toward the boy, who went rigid at first, but relief floods him the instant he recognizes the collector, the same man from earlier today, who strides forward, gives his name, and admits he was worried about the boy, which is why he'd gone searching for him. Rage surged in the boy as the collector's arrival ripped him out of training. If the collector only came to mock, he should leave. His voice chokes and falters. He can't fully express himself. It's no surprise. He built his life on speech and performance, so now his tongue betrays him as he scrambles for the right words. Childhood frustration explodes inside him, and he steels himself to confront the kid again. The collector warned that if the boy uncovers a new skill, nobody can prove it's real without an appraisal, right? The collector strode forward, offering to appraise it himself, and asking if the boy would let him come by. A year later, the collector reappeared, true to his promise, leaving the boy dumbfounded. He'd never expected our hero to actually keep his word. The man was oddly uncanny, and throughout his visit he coldly sized the boy up. He realizes he's still untalented, grits his teeth and trains like a man possessed, soon blazing past the collector. And when they meet again, he tends to the now-grown young man as illness brings him low. Soon the collector looks up and the boy towers over him, shot up in height and wearing an unexpectedly older face. Now stronger, he turned to the distracted collector and asked what was on his mind. Before the collector could answer, he erupted into an eager tale of how he'd taken down an intermediate monster with a single swing just recently. Unbelievable. The collector still sees the night the man battled a single monster from dusk till dawn, every brutal second seared into his memory. Half a century vanished in a heartbeat the moment the collector first crossed paths with this man. He's clearly past his prime. The protagonist can't shake the fear that supporting the man's desire could doom him. Refusing that fate, the protagonist lunges in to stop him this instant, and as he opens his mouth to speak, he whooped, bursting with joy, one step closer to unlocking his skill, convinced that once he claimed it, he'd become a beacon of hope for everyone without skills. Seeing his friend's burning enthusiasm, the collector can't snuff it out and throws his full support behind him. The friend pivots, locks eyes, flashes a sly grin, and teases, "You're not a very good liar." That same day, a howling snowstorm swallowed the whole village as the collector staggered into a nearby inn, haunted by his failure to stop his friend from leaving once more. Dread coiled in his gut. He knew the human body was fragile, and he was sure this would end badly for his friend. Perched at the counter, our main character got pulled into conversation when the bartender leaned in and asked if the collector had been stranded by the blizzard. He nodded and confessed he'd been visiting a friend up in the nearby mountains. Hold up, did he just reveal he has a friend living in the mountains? Hold up, he's got to be talking about that strange old man, right? The bartender admitted he'd been swamped with other travelers' stories about the old man. Everyone spinning wild yarns of a bewildered warrior duking it out with monsters. So your friend really is one hell of a character, huh? The bartender warned the collector, "Stay out of the mountains, at least for now." A deadly monster exploded into view, and the whole country blasted out an urgent emergency warning. A few reckless adventurers barreled into the mountains, scoffing at the warnings. The collector leaned forward, demanding to know if the monster was truly dangerous, and the bartender sneered it was like a two-legged white giant. The collector drained his drink as the idea that it might be a yeti struck him. If so, his friend could tear that monster apart without breaking a sweat. The bartender leaned in and hissed that the monster was massive, 3 times bigger than a normal one, and he'd heard it could exhale blasts of ice-cold air. The collector hurled his payment onto the table and bolted out the door. High in the snowy mountains, a band of adventurers pressed behind the collector's friend as he goaded their colossal foe, Grin Electric. It's his first ever face-off with a creature this massive, and this beast is anything but ordinary. A towering frost giant looms before them. Terror seizes the adventurers, and the collector's friend charges forward to face the beast. The frost giant towers, far stronger than anything in sight, yet the man's grin explodes with exhilaration at the chance to clash with that living mountain. He tore through the freezing blizzard, breath frosting in his lungs as he sprinted to reach his friend. Nobody sane would dare face the frost giant, a towering behemoth and one of the mightiest of the giants. He's certain his inexperienced friend would be wiped out if he tried. Even a band of seasoned adventurers can't fell a single frost giant. What chance does an unskilled ally have against that raw, bone-crushing might? Knowing his friend inside out, the collector bets he'll charge in and try to fight it, desperate to wrench his powers free. He unleashed every technique he had, yet the collector still couldn't move fast enough. He's already locking onto 2 signals ahead. One is the frost giant, so who's behind the other one? The collector burst onto the scene just in time to see the monster's attacks smash into his friend, hurling him into a nearby trunk. She barked at the collector to sprint over and check if he was all right, even as blood poured from his wounds. He roared at the collector to back off. This was his battle to fight. He still believed that slaying the monster would grant him a skill, and he inhales deeply. And then he unleashes a war cry so thunderous it shudders the entire mountain and forces the frost giant to hesitate. In a heartbeat, he spotted an opening and a grin split his face. He catapulted forward, sword flashing, and dove into the frost giant's gaping maw just as it inhaled to unleash a blast of icy breath. He topples the frost giant, but the beast lashes out with one final crushing blow that slams into him and sends his body hurtling into the snowy fields. Both fighters crumpled at the same instant, the monster soaked in its own blood. The adventurers huddled back at a distance, eyes locked on the motionless frost giant as the old man landed a killing blow. Where has he gone? The collector drops to his knees beside his wounded companion. Gasping and bloodied, the man grins and asks, "Did you see it?" A man with no special skills single-handedly defeated a frost giant. The collector barely listened and snapped at his friend to shut up, his eyes glued to the deep, bloody wounds, while the friend forced a smile and insisted he was fine. With them already there, the friend pleaded with the collector for one last favor: put his appraisal skills to the test. The collector clasps his friend's hand and nods. A heartbeat later, the friend presses, "So, what's the outcome?" The collector roars his praise, telling his friend his talent blows him away. With almost no strength left, he croaked a laugh, stretched a trembling hand toward the collector's tear-streaked face, and confessed he'd always been a terrible liar, even to the end. The frost giant crumples to the ground, the adventurers bolt into the night, and the collector shoulders his friend's body back to the cabin. The collector laid his friend to rest, then stormed to the back of the cabin and found a log scarred with half-finished carvings. His friend, only just dead, had gouged inept man into the wood. The collector shattered into tears again, eyes locked on the letters as he wondered if his friend had carved that cruel name himself. He snatched a sharpened tool from his friend and started carving into the log, the collector watching. He knew his friend wasn't clumsy, and had spent his whole life pouring everything into his work. He roared that his friend was an extraordinary soul who refused to be crushed by destiny, and the collector turned the log into his friend's gravestone, chiseling "outstanding" beside the old, inept man carving. He dropped to his knees at his friend's grave and lingered, then pushed himself upright and vowed he'd bring more flowers once winter loosened its grip and spring began to show. The cabin loomed undisturbed, yet fresh flowers already crowned the grave. 2 passers-by cut across the man's land, their jaws dropping at a cabin tucked so deep into the mountains, and that's when they spotted the grave. She halted mid-step, eyes locking on the gravestone's stark line, "Outstanding inept man," and burst into laughter at the absurd childish epitaph. She whipped around to face her companion and called her elder sister. She snaps, "That's the collector's older sibling!" Skills rule this world, and our protagonist survives by hunting them down and flipping them for profit. He slumps alone in a local diner, a hollow weight in his chest, when a sudden image of his just-departed friend rips into his mind before he can stop it. He bows his head and whispers, "This is not good. I need something different." As if the heavens had answered, the woman from earlier bursts forward, beaming, and floods him with thanks for racing to her diner. He shrugs with a grin. No surprise, her diner's only been open a few days. The elderly owner beams and thanks him for coming, reminding him this little place exists because of his help. She burned to keep this conversation going, but the collector saw she was swamped and stepped back, assuring her it was fine. He didn't want to take up more of her time. She admits the team has been running on fumes, then beams. A diligent, sincere young recruit just jumped aboard. Just as she says it, the lady bellows, "Violet!" and fiercely beckons the newcomer to come over. A lovely girl explodes into view on a lively stride, beaming as she bounds up to them with a dish in her hand. Her breath snags. She recognizes the person she's serving, the collector, and he shoots a sharp glance her way. He edges closer, zeroing in on the flower vendor he met earlier, and suddenly it hits him. He'd slipped her a job flyer. He gaped. Her transformation was so radical he barely recognized her. The collector narrows his eyes and asks if she's used to the job. She nods, steady and certain, then gives her order: steamed buns packed with fragrant herbs. Gratitude burst from the collector's voice as he thanked them, raw and unmistakable. Violet's eyes lock onto the diners, demolishing their hearty plates, making the collector's meal look painfully bare. She urges him to order the Salisbury steak from the lunch menu. He waves it off, promising to save it for another time. He's just returned from a long, grueling journey, so Violet lets the matter drop. She slips back to the kitchen, stealing one last hard look at the collector's lonely table where he'd just finished his meal. He strolls through town, heart heavy, watching life stubbornly march on while death lingers in the shadows. He wrapped up his day's skill-collecting duties. He mulls grabbing flowers as a tribute on his way home, anxiety prickling. Did the flower shop girl already lock up for the night? The thought barely forms when Violet bursts into view, still selling flowers. She blurts out how many times they've bumped into each other today. He gapes. She's still selling flowers after dark. Violet says she hawks them to scrape together a little extra cash, and every bloom was grown in her own garden. Relief crashed over the collector as he exhaled and confessed he still needed to buy flowers for a friend. She spots the gloom clinging to him and pounces, asking if he's eaten dinner. The collector freezes and admits he hasn't had a meal yet. Her mother is a gardening prodigy, coaxing jaw-dropping vegetables out of her backyard, so she beckons the collector to dinner at her house. He gapes, baffled by her intentions, and Violet tells him a good, warm meal will lift his spirits. She watched the light go out of him earlier that afternoon, and the sight stunned her. He was floored. She noticed every tiny detail. The collector has done so much for her that a fierce need to repay him gnaws at her, and she tells him beforehand that their house is tiny and run down. Her honesty shattered his reserve. The collector accepted her invitation without hesitation. Late that afternoon, with the sun slipping toward the horizon, they head to her house, volleying through topics, and she can't ignore how he breathes life into every conversation. His job relies on it. Born with raw talent, he forged those abilities to a razor edge through his skill-collecting service, and before long they stood before a shabby, no-frills house. He stepped inside and his eyes swallowed a front yard gone wild with plants, potted, climbing, and spilling into every corner. His enhanced night vision cut through the black. Rows of vegetables burst with life, and the garden stood immaculate. Violet froze at the threshold and blurted she'd brought the collector, asking if he could stay for dinner, when an older woman's warm voice rang out, greeting her. Violet's mother grins apologetically and says if she'd known a guest was coming, she'd have whipped up something special to give him a proper welcome, while Violet's little brother and sister edge forward, whispering whether this older brother is the collector their big sister's been talking about, and they can't help staring at the massive, impressive bag slung over his shoulder. The collector bows modestly and greets them, and Violet beams as she presents him to her small family of 4. Her mother, her younger brother, and her younger sister. After trading polite smiles, her mother beckons him to a chair and darts into the kitchen to get their dinner ready. Violet lunges forward, offering to help and leaving the collector to mind her 2 siblings. A young boy streaks up, eyes alight as he eagerly approaches the collector. They blurted out that their older sister had told them he was the one who helped Violet land her job. A sly grin curled on the collector's lips as he leaned in, and when the little girl asked about his work, he nodded and replied, "Yes, I do." The protagonist declared he trades for and salvages the discarded skills others no longer want. A little girl, trembling with excitement, cried out and snapped Violet to attention. Her younger siblings swarmed her, voices crackling with hope as they begged to know if the collector would buy their skills, yet they still had no clue what those skills even were. The family was too poor, and the free appraisal group won't reach them for years. The collector barged up to their busy mother, then whipped around and grinned. "Want your skills evaluated? For free?" The children's eyes blazed as they leapt at the chance, but their mother shrugged it off, flicking a cool glance at Violet while Violet spoke. The collector knows if these kids carry the same twisted skills as their older sister, the evaluation results will blindside them. To him, the 2 kids blaze with terrifying skill. The boy is iron-willed, lightning-fast, and shockingly strong. His sister is a cold mastermind, sensing everyone around her, always plotting and utterly intimidating. The collector leaned in, voice low as a secret, and told their mother her 2 children's skills were astonishing. The older woman's shoulders loosened and a relieved smile broke across her face. Meanwhile, while Violet and her mother chopped and stirred dinner, the collector ran circles with the children, and today a bolt of truth hit Violet. The items the collector had been gathering were actually skills. Her mother admitted she wasn't especially gifted. Then the older woman cut through the silence and assured her she needn't worry anymore. Violet's asthma had recently improved. Violet realized she barely collided with anything anymore. Every one of those changes snapped into place after the collector. He'd snapped up every one of her flowers at their first meeting. And she remembered, bewildered, that he'd paid her more than twice the usual amount. Could that really be true? In a flash, a hearty, belly-filling dinner waits, steam curling and daring you to dig in. They surged around the table, and right there among them stood the collector. He sinks his teeth in and a warm calm floods him, even though it's just a plain no-frills meal. He grins, totally unsurprised. He can tell this meal was crafted from overflowing love. This place was nothing like home. Every delicious bite yanked him back to memories of his iron-fisted parents and his sister, the only ally he had. Violet snags him as he drifts into thought and asks if anything bothers him. The collector just keeps eating, smiling between bites as he raves the food is delicious. Once the plates are cleared, the collector lingers, carving out extra moments to spend with the children. They'd lingered so late the house felt asleep around them. The kids yawned, wiped out from nonstop chatter, so when their mother asks if they're ready for bed, the collector leaps forward to tuck them in while the older woman finishes her cleaning. He grinned, promising his work and travel adventures would spin perfect bedtime stories for the kids, and she accepted. They piled into the bedroom and the collector dove into his adventures. Just as he was about to unleash the dragon story, the boy burst out asking if they could request a favor before he departed. Both children pressed close as the boy pleaded with the collector to buy their talents. With the family scraping by, they pinned their hopes on those gifts to lift everyone out of poverty. The collector watches the two young ones, and the fierce way they love their family sparks a flicker of envy in him. He presses a gentle hand to their heads and says he collects the skills people toss aside, promising that as the two hone those abilities, they'll become tools for their future. And if cash ever becomes a desperate need, one call to him will pull them through. After he tucked the kids in, Violet's mother hurried over to thank him for putting them to sleep. He said he was glad to help, and that simple reply jolted her into remembering how he'd cared for her eldest, Violet. She catches a bright new light in Violet. She's been noticeably more upbeat lately. Guilt claws at her. She's convinced that as a mother, she brings nothing but problems into her children's lives. She locks eyes with the collector and dares him. Will you buy my skills? She clings to every saved coin, desperate to change her children's lives. The collector stands frozen, words ripped from his throat. She echoed her children's words verbatim, the exact lines they'd said just minutes before. He pauses, then tells the elderly woman their home overflows with a joy that stuns him. His work has led him into countless families. He lights a fire about how mastering certain skills can transform someone's whole life, then cuts deals with people floundering with their abilities. He won't buy skills just to pocket a single payout. Money can't guarantee a joyful life. The older woman sensed it and let the subject drop, smiling to hear their small family seemed content. And the collector admitted, voice heavy with longing, that he envied them. If that's true, why not seize the chance to join their family? The old woman even told him Violet brims with admirable traits. The moment her name is mentioned, Violet bolts over, cheeks blazing with embarrassment as her mom practically shoves them into a match. Violet's cheeks flare red as she snaps at her mom to stop spouting strange things. It's rattling the collector. Her mother smiled, certain Violet would be pleased. It only drove Violet deeper into mortification, and the collector watched, taken aback by the fierce assertiveness she unleashed when anger hit. As he reaches for the door, she flashes a knowing smile and teases that he looks envious of them. He admits that being wrapped in their joyful chaos has lifted his spirits a bit. With those words, he strides out of their home, the pleasant warmth brushing him like a greeting that prickles his skin and seeds a cold, restless unease. Violet grabbed his clothes, wouldn't meet his eyes, urged him to ignore her mom's words, and swore he'd always be welcome at their home. Let illness strike, he can lean on them without shame, and she vows to spring to his side the instant he needs help. Her heartfelt offer slammed into him. He ground his teeth as the idea of a cozy home overwhelmed him, yet he still forced out a thank you. He's a moth to a lone light slicing through the dark, and that pull slams him with one question. Is it wrong to be so captivated, to ache for it? The collector clung to the back of a rattling wagon as it tore across a vast open field, having hitched a ride on a carriage, convinced this eastern run would be a refreshing change for his business. Other travelers leaned in, saying the region is calm and peaceful. Only the occasional weak monster wanders through, easily dispatched by the villagers, and the collector nodded in agreement. Left with nothing to do, he dives into reviewing every skill he's gathered. Just then, the carriage jolts violently to a halt. A fellow passenger snaps, demanding to know why they've halted, while the carriage driver explodes at the man blocking their path, furious over his reckless stunt. Ahead, a long-haired young man lunges forward, terror carved into his face as he seizes them and begs, "Please, come to my village." The carriage driver snaps they're headed far east on this road and refuses to stop, barking for the young man to step aside as panic claws at him and he insists a horde of monsters is about to overrun his village, begging them for help. Monsters? In a place this tranquil? They gape in disbelief. How could this boy know? The question hits him, but he admits he wields a premonition-like skill, and the traveler in the carriage narrows his eyes, brimming with suspicion. His tale reeks of fabrication, yet the collector's already hooked. The carriage driver, fed up with the kid's antics, snaps they don't have time for his false predictions and shoves the young man aside as he urges the carriage forward. The young man screamed in frustration, demanding why no one understood, while the collector watched from a carriage speeding away, curiosity igniting. What was this talent? A skill the collector, who'd seen countless abilities, possibly thousands, couldn't place. He'd never encountered anything like it. He fired up his appraisal skill, and it blazed that the young man possessed a bizarre power called Return by Death, layered over razor swordsmanship and iron tenacity. The collector had never come across anything this unique. With a flick of practiced skill, he snaps at the carriage driver to stop and let him out right here. The young man sinks into despair, certain he's failed again, when a voice slices through his complaints and asks if he can explain the topic he brought up. The collector steps forward, spits out one chilling line, and the room freezes. "I'm the collector," he snaps, "Ripley." And his eyes flash as he remembers the collector had been in the carriage earlier. Before the collector can respond, Ripley blurts a grateful, breathless, "Thanks." You were the only one who ever listened to me. Ripley bursts in, breathless, warning that an earthquake is moments away and will smash the cave mouth that cages the monsters, unleashing a ravenous horde on the village. The collector goes quiet, suddenly seeing why people doubt Ripley. The room was so quiet it felt like it read his thoughts, and Ripley admitted his tale sounded impossible, and the collector would scoff. The protagonist leaned in, voice calm and fierce. He believed him. His trade had sharpened an appraisal eye. Yet in all his years, he'd never seen a talent like Ripley's. Ripley resurrects through death, mirroring the collector's trading. An unprecedented, one-of-a-kind power with no equal past or present. Ripley reels to learn the other also wields a unique skill, and the collector leans in, curious because he might be able to help. After a moment, Ripley nods and drops the bomb. Return by death means every time he dies, the whole world snaps back 24 hours before his death, and only he remembers. The world has already spun through this cycle 4 times. Wait, the collector's memory snaps awake, replaying every move he made in the last day. He barreled into the town where the eastbound carriage had left a day earlier, crashed at a nearby inn overnight, and clambered aboard the carriage this morning. Wait, he's already done all this 4 times? Ripley just nods and says yes. He reveals the skill ignites the moment he dies, wrenching the entire world into an endless loop. Disbelief claws at them, yet the collector charges forward. Before long, they hit a crossroads with a lone signpost jutting up in the center. Ripley says the north road leads to his village, but the collector fires off more questions. How can Ripley be sure the world hasn't shifted, that he's not slipping between parallel worlds? Ripley reveals that as he died a second time, a village child uttered the name of the flower he'd taught her the first time. She couldn't place where she'd learned the flower's name, and the mystery gnawed at her. Ripley announced the bloom was poisonous to bait the truth, and when he died and returned, she not only recalled its name, but now knew it was deadly. And, just like the first time, she had no idea where that knowledge had come from. The collector presses if the knowledge stays, and Ripley snaps that it does. This power isn't about travel, it's about returning through death. The collector staggers under the revelation that the world has already cycled 4 times, and that knowledge leaks between eras. If someone unleashes a prazzle or plunder during the 24-hour loop Ripley's death triggers, wouldn't their skills start to glitch and warp? The collector's sister would spot that in an instant. She never missed a thing. He decided to tail Ripley, hoping being near would jolt his sister into awareness, and he might sense a strange ripple across the world and be pulled here. Hope exploded. He might finally meet his sister. He shoved the thought aside as the earth convulsed. He staggered, but Ripley planted himself like a rock and said, "It's starting again." He claws for balance as the earth flips under his feet. Could this be the quake Ripley warned about? Ripley erupts into a frantic, breathless account of what happens next. The cave's entrance just collapsed again, unleashing the monsters. Panic claws at him as death threatens to claim him once more. Does that doom the villagers too? 2 of them can't possibly hold back that swarm of monsters. Ripley's anguish hit him like a blow. Ripley had already died 4 times, and asking him to sacrifice his spirit for a mere shot at reuniting with his sister was a cruelty he couldn't bear. If Ripley's power keeps the world trapped in a loop, it could erase the future where he keeps searching for his sister before it even has a chance. With it trapped beyond his grasp, he steels himself and bellows to Ripley. They dangled a can't-refuse discount, betting his silver tongue would seal the deal and unite them to crush the monsters. Ripley called it. The cave's entrance seal lay smashed into jagged shards. A massive swarm of monsters explodes out, a writhing tide that floods the battlefield. Ripley rummages through his pockets, guilt clawing at him when he finds only a few coins, and the collector shrugs, saying it's enough for now before selling him a bundle of lethal combat skills. Advanced swordsmanship, razor-sharp perception, and raw physical power surge through him. When Ripley touches him, her palms burst into light, sealing the transfer as her new skills blaze to life in him. With these new powers burning inside him, he storms the monster horde, ready to rewrite his fate and drag his village back from the brink. Ripley's fierce determination to save his village slammed into the collector, and he couldn't stop himself from firing a brutal question. When asked if he'd flee from death, Ripley snarled, shoved the thought aside, and swore he'd never betray the one talent that defines him. He vowed that if fate could be turned back, he'd rip apart destiny itself to drag his village out of the monster's clutches. The collector went quiet, secretly hoping those lofty ideals wouldn't someday bring him trouble. Ripley snaps that the cave's right up ahead. The place is swarming with low and intermediate-class monsters, and he spots a high-class beast prowling among them. They sprinted to the heart of the problem and caught sight of a few monsters lying in wait inside the cave. Ripley rockets forward as our protagonist hangs back for a single heartbeat. If Ripley dies now, Time will snap back once more, and every scrap of experience and every hard-earned ability will transfer without fail. If he ever discovers the skills he poured into Ripley have slipped from his grasp, he'll feel the tremor of something huge igniting, even if the reset stole every memory of what came after. Ripley barrels forward, cleaving every monster in his path, now relishing each kill and marveling at his lightning-fast swordsmanship as his perception skill renders his enemies motionless before him. The Collector unleashed his stored skills to pulverize the low-class monsters, freeing Ripley to zero in on the intermediate one. The main character hones his fire magic as Ripley rockets forward, then freezes mid-stride. 2 mid-level monsters loomed before him. Ripley planted his feet and before either could make a move, tore one down in an instant. The other monster launches itself at him, claws outstretched, raking Ripley's arm with a savage swipe. This wound? It barely bites against the cold finality of death. From behind, the Collector calls out if he's all right, and says he'll head over to Ripley now that the lesser monsters are handled, while Ripley tears through the horde, blades flashing and insisting everything's fine. He squares up to the Collector and vows that the skills he learned from him let him crush any enemy. At last he can seize the chance to rewrite his destiny. Ripley's words died mid-sentence as a hulking monster burst out, and with one brutal strike lopped his head clean off. A sudden earthquake rips through Ripley's modest village, and the villagers, Ripley himself standing before a young girl, reel in stunned disbelief. This usually tranquil place never trembles, so everyone knows this shouldn't be happening. After a long, breathless wait, a lone villager's gaze snapped to the ridge as something thundered down from the mountains beyond the village. They barely had time to wonder before monsters flooded the village, ripping everything into chaos, and one of them sank its teeth into Ripley. His skill erupted for the first time, and he collapsed, dead before his mind could catch up to what was happening. A voice tore through his fog. Someone yelled his name, and he jolted back into sword training as a fellow trainee demanded, "Why are you spacing out?" Ding. Ripley jolted, eyes locked on his hands. Hadn't he just died? He grilled them for the exact time and date. Ripley tore straight into the village square. He roared, yanking every eye and ear to him, warning monsters would descend on the village any moment and screaming for everyone to run. They stood like bewildered monsters in that tranquil village. Why would he dare say that? Ripley declared his power had ripped him back from death. He'd returned from the future, and the townspeople, ignoring his warnings, swarm him, mesmerized by his strange abilities. They swarm him, swearing he's always been in the village and that coming back from the future is impossible. It's gotta be a dream, right? No sooner had the words left their mouths than the ground heaved and a horde of monsters burst forth. Ripley watched the monsters obliterate the entire town while he lay gravely wounded, crushed that nobody would believe him as searing agony made him doubt he'd survive. Is Ripley doomed to plunge into this cycle forever? One more time. Mid-practice, Ripley is suddenly yanked back 24 hours. The same colleague snaps, "Why are you daydreaming?" And Ripley clamps his hand around the wooden sword's hilt with careful, steady control. Out of nowhere, he whips the blade into a lethal dance, every slash screaming masterful swordsmanship, hawk-eyed perception, and raw explosive strength. He hurls a frantic apology at the Collector, voice cracking as he admits he lost concentration and made a mess. At the rear of the carriage, the Collector leans back and banters lightly with the other passenger about how tranquil the area is, their earlier conversation replaying like a familiar refrain. Just like before, he dives into his stored skills, and his jaw drops at what he finds. Some skills stumble, falling far short of where they should be. Alarm bells blare. The skills in stock aren't right. Several combat skills had their levels shaved down a notch, and even the clearly defined advanced swordsmanship took a hit. A nearby passenger zeroed in on the worry carved across his face and asked what was wrong. He kept his cool and waved it off as nothing but business on his mind. Panic tore through him as he scrambled to piece together how this had happened. Then a voice outside barked, "Halt the carriage!" Ripley roared from the front, demanding, "Is the Collector here?" Then confessed he'd been distracted and had blown everything. Confusion slammed into him. He'd just heard someone call his name, loud and unmistakable. With a sharp appraisal, the Collector spots the holes in the young man's skills. Ripley names himself and swears he'll be better this time, and the Collector springs from the carriage to confront him about those gaps. Ripley rips the story back to the beginning, forcing out every detail again, and they bolt for the cave entrance, its mouth still undamaged. The Collector demands answers about the whole mess, snaps, "This is Ripley's 5th return because of the time loop, right?" And the other nods, sealing it. Denial clause at our main character. But the young man still carries every missing level from the Collector's array of skills, proving Ripley's account true. Determined to shatter the relentless cycle, he plunges into partnership with Ripley once more. Right on cue, the earth convulses, and the Collector snaps. Is this the earthquake Ripley mentioned? Ripley's eyes blaze with determination as he plants his feet, hand clenched on the hilt, ready to rip his sword free. Moments later, a horde of monsters erupted into view. The collector unleashed basic fire magic, scorching the weaker creatures. He knew it was the most effective strategy. Ripley surged towards the cave he'd just uncovered, the yawning throat that had unleashed the monsters. He remembers the first time he stumbled into that cave and realized the quake had shattered its seal. Dread coiled in his gut because the last time he tried to warn the villagers, they wouldn't believe him. He stepped forward, vowing to annihilate the monsters before they could strike the village. Ripley plants himself before them now, radiating confidence, admitting he once threw his life away by recklessly charging into that cave. Now he carves through monsters with the advanced sword mastery he learned from the collector. Defeating them is a breeze compared to before. Awareness of high-level monsters surged through him, and he ripped himself free from the collector's skills, refusing to rely on them any longer. A thunderous thud ripped through the ground, and the creature that had killed Ripley slammed back into view. This time the young man swore he'd never taste death again. The collector sized up the cavern's colossal, high-level beast in an instant. Was this the monster that killed Ripley? Our main character charges earth armor and ignites instant force, poised to hurtle to Ripley's rescue in a heartbeat. Turns out we won't even have to use it! Ripley cleaves through the monster's limbs in a blur, unleashing a relentless assault to fell the giant. And he roars he'll rewrite his destiny and the villagers. He drives the finishing strike. The colossal monster folds to the earth. The collector stares as the young man slips away, and Ripley names the youth's sole talent. Pride exploded in his chest. He'd seized fate's reins and rewritten his destiny. Ripley's village buzzes with people rushing through their chores, and Ripley stands shoulder to shoulder with the collector, watching life snap back into place. Yet the collector gapes in stunned disbelief, his memory wiped of how it happened. Ripley grinned and reminded him the collector had helped in the last battle. And most of all, a fierce relief washed over him that he and every villager were safe. The moment those words left his mouth, Ripley collapsed to his knees, clawing at himself. He might have saved everyone, but he'd died and come back 4 brutal times. He rockets to his feet, probing whether the collector will buy skills, then presses the collector to purchase his soul skill, the power to return by death. Ripley knows this skill is a ticking bomb, but the collector, a management ace, realizes he can stash it outside the designated skill slots, and the young man no longer worries about money. The collector's fingers clamp around his hand, silent and unyielding. The collector declares he'll claim Ripley's soul skill, returned by death at no cost, and the pact snaps shut. But instead of the usual luminous glow swallowing their hands, a lone, stubborn spark flares as the protagonist bows his head. He confessed it was all for nothing. He'd tried before, but stuck at level 1. Leadership, he couldn't buy Ripley's soul skill, and Ripley crumpled, devastated. He yanks the collector by the collar, and snarls that as long as he can return through death, he's condemned to live his whole life with no way to truly die. He unravels, spitting out every future torment he'll suffer. So if a disease kills him, is he trapped reliving that final excruciating day forever? Do they expect Ripley to kill himself every day to rewind time and cling to life? The loop would just keep grinding, dragging the whole world in its wake. Silence crashed over them both, and Ripley recoiled, choking out, "Sorry. It's not the collector's fault." The collector snaps to his feet in outright disagreement and confesses to Ripley, "I'm sorry, my trading skill just isn't strong enough." His skill is locked at level 1. And not a single soul has ever managed to raise it. A stab of pity ripped through him. He couldn't even begin to fathom Ripley's raw terror, or the gnawing worry that clung to his soul skill. Ripley crashes into death again, plunging him into a merciless loop of dying and being dragged back to life. If the world keeps looping the same events, sooner or later someone will catch on. If someone tried to weaponize Ripley's return by death, they'd lock him in a brutal loop, condemned to die again and again at his captor's every whim. Those thoughts snapped him into asking aloud why he ever became a collector. The answer landed like a gut punch of sorrow. He declares he hustles as a collector to sharpen his abilities and hunt down one particular person, convinced that if skills are ranked by levels, cracking level 2 is within his reach. He locks eyes with Ripley and apologizes. He can't help now, but swears he'll grind his trading skill to level 2 and buy back the young man's return with his own death. The collector admits he has no idea how long this will take, but he swears he won't quit while a single shard of hope remains. His friend who battled to the very end would laugh if he folded now. Ripley confesses that even at level 2 he still can't fathom how he comes back from death, but grumbling's off the table for him. They part ways, Ripley waving and asking if the collector will step in again should his abilities ever falter. And the collector promises to be there the moment Ripley reaches out, no hesitation. The collector locks his gaze ahead, still reeling from the astonishing skill known as return by death. As always, Only his skills still steal his breath, and because of them, time has started flowing normally again. He grinds on as the collector, tearing through every lead in a relentless hunt to find his sister. He's convinced that if time refuses to move, their chance to reunite dies. The collector swept back into the city, a private grin cracking his face as he admitted to himself how thrilled he was to be back. The familiar streets instantly settling him. A local springs forward with a grin and calls, "It's been ages. Aren't you supposed to be working today?" He snaps that he's not working. A regular client summoned him, and he brandishes a letter as he explains. He pushes forward, a tattered arena poster slams into view, and before long he's standing at his destination. He flings the door open just in time to see two men wrestling a man on the ground, the pinned man bellowing that no one can defeat Lee Undold. Lee Undold spins around, and the instant his eyes lock on the collector, his face explodes into a radiant grin. The collector strode up to his client, quipping about the wrestling ring in Lee Undold's home. He'd expected nothing less from the arena champion. The champion grins, eyes blazing, declares he's hell-bent on sharpening his abilities, and the monster attraction skill he bought from the collector ignites that hunger. The skill became indispensable. The collector kept selling that monster attraction ability to him, and our protagonist's eyes snapped to the person standing right beside the champion. Lee Undold thrusts the other man forward and bellows, "This is Congus!" Lee Undold zeroed in on the collector and enlisted them to aid Congus. The protagonist reels as Congus, out of nowhere, clasps his hands and pleads with him to let him buy the cooking skill for his wife, swearing he'll pay any price. The collector glares at Lee Undold, grilling him. "What's going on here? Weren't we supposed to keep the sale of skills under wraps?" Selling skills sparks trouble. Once word gets out, people swarm you, demanding specific talents. That's why the collector hides that information like a dragon clutching treasure. Then the champion breaks into a sly grin. "Fine. Here's the rewritten paragraph." He leans in and asks if it's really okay to hand it to his best friend. "Don't you think?" The collector can't alter a thing now. It's final. He resigns himself and leans in to hear what Congus has to say. The trio perches into the champion's reception area, as the champion himself slides drinks into their hands. Congus cradled a mug, longing burning in his gaze as he murmured that it had been ages since he'd had a proper drink, and the collector, puzzled by the remark, blinked and asked him to explain. Congus grinned, saying he'd recently tied the knot with a wonderful wife. He earns his keep as a hard-hitting fighter and roaming adventurer while she pours herself into being a devoted housewife. And as he spoke, tears streamed down his face as he vowed to teach her to cook. She was painfully unskilled in the kitchen. The collector snapped that if cooking was the real problem, she could conquer it without a special skill, learn from someone else, or grind it into mastery through practice, and that would cost far less than buying a skill from him. Congus slams his fist onto the table, drowning in helplessness. His wife is beyond saving. She tosses measurements aside, wields a ladle like a tablespoon, then douses salty dishes with sugar. Sure, sweetness will save them. The most maddening part is his wife demands every meal be made from scratch. He's genuinely glad she pours her heart into it, but poor Congus can't take it anymore. The food tastes terrible. Silence choked the room. Then the collector snapped the obvious at him. "Did you tell her all of this? Are you kidding?" Congus locks his secrets away, never daring to tell his dear wife. Lee Undold and the collector scowl, the collector convinced that if things go on like this, nothing will ever improve. Finally, Lee Undold cuts in, admitting he sees the collector's angle, but he's staggered that his fearless best friend could be felled by a single meal. Congus realized mere talk wouldn't convince anyone, so he stormed in today bearing the actual food. He whipped a plain lunchbox from his bag and thrust it into the collector's view in Lee Undold. The champion admits he hasn't dared peek inside yet. Fear coils in his gut. The collector went silent. Seeing the champion terrified by something like this stunned him. That could only mean the meal was extraordinary. So he activated a stored skill, intuition, and probed the boxed meal. Shock slammed into him as the skill screamed for him to flee, and Leon Dold snatched the lunchbox lid and flung it open. A rancid cloud billows from the food and Congus snaps at him from behind. Leon should have aired the room first. At the same instant, the collector unleashes stored skills, bracing with poison resistance, a shimmering barrier, and ironclad endurance. Leon Dold was forced to choke on a suffocating stench as dizziness slammed into him, and he stared, bewildered, at a lunchbox overflowing with tentacles, strange mushrooms, frog legs, and a mysterious hand. A thick black liquid swallowed everything. The three froze, eyes glued to the bizarre sight before them as the collector asked, "No, but really, what is this?" Congus grins and says his wife calls it an overflowing bliss of paradise, while the champion quips it ought to be called an overflowing horror of hell. The collector fires the question at Congus. "Does your wife actually eat it?" Congus shoots back that she does, devouring it like it's nothing, and Leondold reels in disbelief. Was he really serious? The champion stared down the plate, utterly spent, then yanked a fork toward the food. Maybe it only looked and smelled terrible. Maybe it wouldn't taste so bad. Our protagonist shot back and called him out. He'd just slammed the meal as disgusting moments earlier. Leondold told himself one bite couldn't kill him, so he sank his teeth into the abominable meal and was instantly racked by tremors. The collector shouted at him, and the champion, utterly spent, could barely stay on his feet. It was that severe. He teetered toward the ground when Congas seized him by the shoulder. He'd seen it coming, his reflexes honed over years. The collector's appraisal snaps to Congas. Level 13 poison resistance. Staggering but expected. Congas consumes this poison every day. They slammed the dreadful lunchbox shut and, after a tense beat, started talking. The collector admitted that even a cooking novice like him wouldn't call this mere bad cooking. It was a whole different beast. Doubt slams into him. Could this be a negative skill? He turns to Congress and demands to know if he's ever even glanced at his wife's skill certificate. Congress tried to request it, but his wife stonewalled, repeatedly refusing to show it to him. He knows his wife should have gotten a skill certificate at 10, and the fact she never showed it to him gnaws at him. He can always use his appraisal skill on her as a last resort. The collector sees Leondold come to, still dazed, decides a party at his house will do, and orders Congas to bring his wife over so he can put her skills to the test. He shot back that if the problem wasn't skill-related, they'd just make it a regular cooking class. Congas exploded with gratitude toward his best friend, and when the topic of cooking came up, the collector revealed he knew a woman who was a master at that craft. He hesitated about inviting her, and the champion snapped, "Yes, bring her. She'll be a huge help." The next day, Violet barreled up to the collector, breathless and apologizing for keeping him waiting. But he brushed it off. He was the one who'd summoned her on such short notice. Nerves coil in Violet. It's her first home party, and she can already tell it's about to erupt into a full-on cooking lesson. The collector gripped at her hand and vowed she'd be all right. When he finally tore into the plate at Sumir-san's diner, served to him by the wizened woman behind the counter, he knew he could turn to Violet for help. Violet thrilled that the collector leaned on her, yet a fierce ache burned. She wanted, more than anything, to be truly useful when it counted. Together, they barreled into Leondold's place and were met by a buzzing crowd, plates clattering, laughter spilling as everyone dug into their meals and reveled. The moment they stepped through the door, the champion's gaze snapped to them and he declared Congas would arrive any minute. On cue, Congas's voice rang out, apologizing for being late. He explained he'd combed his wardrobe and agonized over every choice until he nailed the perfect outfit for the occasion. Beside him, a breathtaking woman with cascading hair leans in, chiding him gently and urging him to mind his manners. The collector, Violet, and the champion gaped. Congas had been deadly serious. His wife was utterly enchanting. She beams with fierce gratitude, thanks them for always watching over her husband, then declares, "I'm Saliferi, so she orchestrated that culinary atrocity." The champion can't resist taunting that his best friend hit the jackpot with Saliferi. She's way out of Congas's league, right? Congas snaps that he and his wife married for love, and she admits she fell head over heels and chased him down. Congas locks eyes with the collector and gives a sharp, knowing nod. This is the moment. The collector unleashes his skill, dissecting her terrible cooking to expose its fatal flaw. Their group split, but the collector's gaze never left Saliferi. She'd just leveled up to 18 in creativity and rocketed to 25 in tastelessness. The collector finally realizes Mary's boundless creativity slammed into her brutal lack of taste and wrecked everything into that awful dish. The collector's cold gaze keeps sizing her up as she hums and cheerfully slides a slice of bread onto her plate. Then his eyes snap to her third skill. He insists they take this conversation behind closed doors. Meal finished, Saliferi nurses a solitary drink as the collector strides up. She spots him, steels herself, and prepares to say that Congas already told her about him. The collector slid up to Whisper's ear, voice low and electric, murmuring that he wanted to discuss her skills and asking her to meet him outside when she had a moment. She flinched and the drink flew from her hand. Glass smashed across the floor as every head snapped to her. Mary stood trembling, pale and wide-eyed. Violet blurted, "Are you all right?" And the collector gave a steady nod, coolly promising he'd take care of the cleanup. But Congas kept his gaze locked from the sidelines, concern coiling in his chest, while the collector stood outside, utterly still and patient. Saliferi staggers forward, hunched and trembling, and he blurts a quick apology for summoning her this way before owning up. He's an appraiser. That's how he learned about her abilities. Saliferi collapses to her knees, begging him not to tell Congas. How desperate is she to keep this secret? The collector already knew she wielded a high-level cosmetic skill. Her skill at changing her appearance eclipsed her terrible taste. She could alter her face entirely. He utters, unnervingly calm, "Are you hiding a burn scar?" And she blanches. How could he possibly know? The collector leans in, smirks, and reveals his job has granted him the uncanny gift of clairvoyance. Silence crackled between them until Celiferi snapped to her feet. The collector already knew everything, so why hide the truth now? Now she begins to share her story. When she was younger, a terrible accident seared her face, leaving deep, permanent burn scars. It ate at her, the cruel root of the loathing she felt for her own face, and she never imagined falling in love. Until one day she sat by the river, crushed, staring into her reflection. A gust ripped her hat away. A young man dove after it, snatched it, handed it back with a grin, and called her one cool lady. That young man was Congus. Cool? That's laughable. Congus jabbed a finger at the jagged burn scars crawling across her face. He declared them insanely cool. To him they were a badge of life. Celiferi might not remember it now, but that moment had meant the world to her. No one had ever spoken to her like that, and his blunt, unfiltered honesty electrified her. Celiferi confesses to the collector that Congus pulled her from danger, and for a while she convinced herself he'd remain nothing but a friend to her, she to him as he was to her. Her heart betrayed her. Love ignited for him, and she swore she'd follow him into any storm to be by his side. Celiferi begs the collector to hide her cosmetic talent from her husband. Without that secret touch, even if Congus tells her she looks stylish, he'll never see her as adorable. All the collector wants to know, is she going to wear that mask forever? A flash of memory slammed into him. His sister, who'd always worn that mask whenever they were together. As the years pass, this gap between truth and lies only yawns wider. And if Congus ever uncovers it, the shock will slam into him like a tidal wave. Regret knots the collector's throat as he forces out the truth. He's an outsider to her inner circle. Yet Celiferi still hears his side. After ripping the secret she'd been hiding into the open, relief flooded her and she finally breathed easier. She hadn't seen it until now. Guilt had been dragging her down all along, and the collector braced, ready to warn her. The door slammed open and Congus burst in, booming that he'd heard every single word. Celiferi's worst nightmare slammed into reality. She froze, terror tightening her chest as Congus crept closer. He lunged for her, she shot away, and Congus snarled that the one thing he loathes above all is seeing her hurt. She mustn't think any less of him. He sweeps her into a warm, crushing embrace, eyes blazing as he praises her ironclad commitment. Celiferi chokes out a vow to cherish her mark, her cooking, everything about her. His words shatter into tears as Leondold, Violet, and the collector look on, witnessing their affection. The collector declares true love is embracing someone exactly as they are, then tables the skills debate. Sort it out later and let the couple have their moment. The next day, the collector returns to Samaritan's diner. Violet slides a slice of cake his way, and burning with curiosity, he tastes the strawberry first. They exclaim it unfolded exactly how Violet envisioned. Celiferi's kitchen disasters are born from her advanced makeup skills. Congus urged her to just cut that skill loose. He insisted she didn't need makeup when she was with him. She shot back that she wanted to look pretty just for him. She's determined to make Congus savor every mouth-watering bite. After their conversation, he grins at the collector and Leondold, confessing she's grown more attached, and it's only made her more adorable to him. The skill crackled with raw power and brutal drawbacks, and the collector smirked that he'd charge Congus for it rather than take it back. Congus slams the payment on the table. He'll pay any price for his beloved wife. And the collector, licking his lips, tells Violet he'll reclaim the skill once he's done eating. He steels himself to weather Congus's syrupy, non-stop gush about his wife, then coolly shrugs it off. Violet beams, saying being loved like that must feel absolutely breathtaking. Doubt churned in the collector, but she slammed her palm down and insisted it was real. He got chewed out for being blind to the girl's feelings. He wolfed down his food, then sprinted back to the champion's location to snatch the skill. He decided it was fine to leave Celiferi's cosmetic skill at level 1. She could shatter that barrier within a year if she fought for it. He swore a pinch of spice could turn any meal into magic and any ordinary day into a story.